Hello, I'm children's author Philip Ardagh, and I've been asked to take part in the Corona Diary project, which I'm delighted to do. This is my office. I have a study as well where I do a lot of writing, but this is my office where I keep foreign editions of my books, and I do all my tax returns and things like that. And I think so there's an inflatable penguin up there, one of three. That's a toy castle. Pile of rubber brains, no home should be without one. Can you see over there? Oh, there we are, there's a camper van. I always ask when I do events that I be given a Winnebago that I can sit in. They gave me a Winnebago, but it was a little bit smaller than I'd hoped. There's a cuddly elephant over there, so elephant trumpet, and I can just see down here there's Elmer the elephant. So anyway, what am I going to talk about? I want to talk about, and I'm going to talk in one long take, so if the phone rings or the ceiling falls down or something like that, I'm going to still keep talking. So this isn't a particularly polished or professional video in that respect, but hopefully some of the advice I give you will be useful. Oh, I like the arm movements, I think I might do it quite well. Good. Diaries. I used to keep diaries when I was very little. I tried keeping diaries, but just finding space for the cows was hard enough, so I settled for diaries instead. And I used to be a member of something called the Puffin Club. Put a moustache outfit, it looks a little bit windswept. I used to be a member of something called the Puffin Club, and it didn't mean you looked after puffins, it referred to puffin books, which are, I hope you know, the children's division of penguin books. And there may be a toddler division called Eggs, I don't know. But being a member of the Puffin Club, we used to get a magazine and lots of interesting articles about authors and things in the days before our authors really did public events. I think Charles Dickens was touring America doing readings, but there weren't really that many. And also we had a chance to buy a Puffin diary, and it used to say on it, genuine imitation leather, which was actually plastic. And I used to write in day, every single day, there was a space. And I have a number of diaries that are absolutely packed with varying degrees of good handwriting. Some days I'd scrawl something quickly, some days I'd write really neatly. Some day the pencil would be very blunt, other days the pencil would be very pointy. So even that actually gives a bit of history, doesn't it? It's not like it was all in the same handwriting or in the same typeface. Just the way it was written gave a clue as to what was going on. And what did I wanted to say about writing a diary during this rather unusual time, this extraordinary time, when in 100 years people are going to look back and go, what was it like when everyone had to stay at home as much as possible? Or when you were at school when very few people were, because the grown-ups you lived with were key workers, and so they had to be out, so you had to be in school. It'll be fascinating looking back on the material. And one of the things I wanted to say was, don't worry about being funny. Just because this is a serious business doesn't mean you have to write in a serious fashion all the time, because policemen who have to go to road traffic accidents, and policewomen I should say, police officers, have to go to road traffic accidents, and there's someone splat on the ground, look like they're smothered in tomato ketchup or strawberry jam. It's not a fun job. And if you were serious all the time, you'd probably burst into tears. I imagine it's the same with undertakers, people who professionally deal with dead bodies. So they have a laugh and a joke sometimes. They're not being disrespectful, but it's their way of getting through things. So if you're at home and your dad's always burping, do include that in your diary. Don't just talk about how you're having to stockpile food, or there isn't food, or you're watching more telly than you usually do or something. Mention those funny details as well, because firstly, a lot of people won't be doing that, so you'll be bringing something to your diaries and making them more readable. And secondly, it gives a true flavour of things. I mean, how do I put this politely? Imagine you're isolated with someone who keeps on farting. But write it down, record it. Don't go, ooh, nobody wants to know about that sort of thing, or ooh, that'll embarrass Dad. If there's a lot of farting, put it down. But also the funny phrases people come up with, grannies and people who lived through the last war or whatever, and often say things, we used to do this and you used to do that, and you might say something. So do keep a record of that. And by that I also mean the posh word, like it's called Minutiae, which is difficult to spell, although hopefully it will appear as if by magic somewhere along the bottom of the screen. And if it doesn't, it's because I either A, forgot, or haven't worked out how to do it. Minutiae is all the little details, all the things you take for granted. I had a Polish friend, sadly he's not alive anymore, but during the war he got out of Poland. He was a child then, and he and his parents got out of Poland, and they came to live in England, in South London. And the way they fed the cat was once a week his mum would throw a fish, a dead fish, a fish from a fishmonger, onto the mat by the front door. And during the week the cat would eat the fish, and at the end of the week his mum would pick up the skeleton, the bones, and then throw down another fish. And that's all he knew. That is how Val assumed people fed their cats. So one day he was at school and he was talking to his new English friends, and he said, "You know, when you throw the fish down on the doormat, and everyone was looking at him strangely, but that's how he knew it, and he assumed that's how it was. And it'd be the same in your family. Now, of course, you're probably not throwing fish down, but the way you store your cereals or do things or stack the cans or funny things that you think aren't important actually could give a real dimension, a real life, bring real life and a connection to people. If you say, my mum managed to get hold of a lot of Bird's Angel Delight, and because she used to love the butterscotch flavour when she was a child, and you think, what's Angel Delight? I don't. But your mum loved it, she managed to get hold of it. And then people who remember Angel Delight themselves, it's a powdery thing you add to milk, and it comes in different flavours. There's something called Bird's Instant Whip, which you used a pint of milk for, and Bird's Angel Delight, which you used half a pint for. And you mix it together and you can get strawberry Angel Delight and all these things. You see, I'm getting exciting because it reminds me of my childhood. So if you mention things that happening to you now, when you're an adult or historians in the future are reading it, it might trigger a memory. So think about the little things. So yes, talk about the queues and having to stand apart, and if you do go out for exercise, being more than a metre apart from people. So do mention all those things, but mention fun things, funny things, and the little things that will really add the individuality to your story. And one last thing I want to say is that we are being told to keep 2 metres apart from people, which is 6'7". 6'7" is actually 2 metres, 1 millimetre, I think. But strangely, I, Philip Ardagh, am 6'7". I am 2 metres tall. So that means you need to keep an Ardagh's distance. So if I'm telling the story, I can add that. And it's not really important. Who cares how tall I am? And I'm not going to lie on the floor to divide you, because either my feet or my head would be touching someone, and that's the last thing we want to do. But by adding that, I'm adding my own take, my own spin. So it's minutiae, little detail, and it's also funny. So hopefully that gives you an example of what I'm talking about. So have fun with your Corona diary at a time when fun is at a premium, where it's all the more important. And I really hope you manage to record some very interesting personal details along with your feeling about the wider issue of what's going on. So stay safe, let's come out the other side.